Hello, dear kids. Today, we're taking you on an exciting journey with 10 fun and amazing stories from the Bible. Here, you'll see the beginning of creation, Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, Abraham's journey, and his love and faith in the Lord. Every story teaches us something special, like being brave, speaking the truth, loving everyone, and always trusting God. So get ready, you'll have fun, you'll learn, and your heart will be filled with joy. Let's begin this wonderful journey through the Bible together.
In the beginning, there was nothing. No earth, no sky, no stars, not even time. Everywhere was only darkness. Then God said, "Let there be light." And light broke through the darkness. God called the light day and the darkness night. That was the first day. On the second day, the Lord created the sky. He called it heaven. On the third day, God raised the land above the waters. He called the waters seas and the dry land earth. Then he said, "Let trees, plants, fruits, and flowers grow," and the earth became green and full of life. On the fourth day, God made the sun to shine during the day, and the moon and stars to light the night. Now time began to move. Day and night, seasons and years. On the fifth day, the sky and oceans filled with life. Birds began to fly, and fish swam in the sea. Then came the sixth day. God made all kinds of animals: lions, cows, elephants, sheep, every living creature. But then God decided to do something very special. He said, "Let us make human beings in our own image." So God formed a man from the dust of the ground. His name was Adam. God breathed the breath of life into his nostrils, and Adam became a living soul. God made a beautiful place for Adam, the Garden of Eden. There were flowing rivers, beautiful trees, and perfect peace. God said, "Take care of this garden, but do not eat from one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." But Adam was alone, so God caused a deep sleep to fall on him, and from one of his ribs he made a woman. Her name was Eve. When Adam saw her, he said, "She is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Now they were together, Adam and Eve, living with God, innocent, naked, and at peace. God looked at everything he had made and said, "It is very good." Then came the seventh day. God rested, not because he was tired, but to show us the value of rest and satisfaction. And this is where our story begins. The story of the earth, of humankind, and of the loving God who created us. On the sixth day, when God created humans, he also created a beautiful and perfect garden called the Garden of Eden. Everything there was filled with peace, overflowing with beauty, love, and joy. That garden was home to Adam and Eve, the very first humans. They walked with God, lived among the animals, and lacked nothing. God gave them just one command: "You may eat the fruit from any tree in the garden, except from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The day you eat from it, you will surely die." Adam and Eve obeyed God's command, but sometime later, Lucifer, a fallen angel, filled with pride and jealousy, entered the scene. Once beautiful and powerful, Lucifer had become proud, believing he could be equal to God. Because of that pride, God cast him and the angels who followed him out of heaven. Determined to ruin God's creation, Lucifer disguised himself by possessing a clever serpent and sent it into the garden. One day, while Eve was walking near the forbidden tree alone, the serpent spoke to her. "Did God really say you must not eat the fruit from this tree?" Eve replied, "God said we must not eat it or even touch it, or we will die." This shows that in the beginning, humans might have understood the language of animals. The serpent whispered, "You won't die. God knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When Eve looked at the fruit, it seemed beautiful and desirable. Wanting wisdom and power, she took the fruit and ate it. Then she gave some to Adam, and he also ate it, disobeying God's one command. As soon as they ate it, their innocence was gone. Sin had entered the world through their disobedience, and it would affect all future generations. They realized they were naked and, for the first time, felt shame. They tried to hide from God, but God, who sees everything, came to them and asked, "Did you eat from the tree I told you not to?" Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent, but God knew the truth. Because they disobeyed, God gave each one a consequence. To Eve, he said, "You will have pain during childbirth, and your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." To Adam, he said, "You will have to work hard all your life to get food. You'll sweat and struggle, and in the end, you'll return to the dust you were made from." To the serpent, Lucifer, he said, "You are cursed. You will crawl on your belly. One day, a child born from a woman will crush your head." This was the first prophecy about the coming of Jesus, spoken by God himself. Then God sent Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden so they wouldn't eat from the tree of life and live forever in their sinful state. To guard the garden, God placed mighty angels with flaming swords. What can kids and adults learn from this? Just like Adam and Eve had a loving father in God, you have loving parents who care for you deeply. They make rules to protect you and guide you. When you listen to their guidance, your life stays safe, joyful, and peaceful. But when you disobey, things can go wrong and life can become filled with sadness and confusion. So always remember, obey your parents because their words come from love just like God. When God banished Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden because they disobeyed his command, they found themselves alone in the world. Sometime later, they had 2 sons, Cain and Abel, the children of Adam and Eve. As the 2 boys grew up, they were each called to bring an offering to the Lord. Cain, who worked the soil, brought a basket of crops and fruits. Abel, a shepherd, lovingly prepared a fat, healthy lamb from his flock. They built altars to offer their gifts to God. Cain offered some of the produce from his fields, but Abel brought the very best lamb from his flock, offering its fat portions with deep love and reverence. From a distance, Cain watched Abel pray, and his face grew hard. Jealousy began to grow in Cain's heart. Instead of learning from his brother, he allowed envy to take root, and that envy slowly turned into anger. God doesn't just look at outward actions, he sees the truth of our hearts. Abel gave with a sincere and devoted heart. Cain did not. That's why God accepted Abel's offering, but rejected Cain's. A little while later, Cain lured Abel out into a field, and in a moment of rage, Cain committed a terrible sin. He killed his own brother. Sin had come knocking at his door, and he let it in. God, who sees everything, spoke to Cain as he stood alone. "Where is your brother?" Cain replied, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" But God already knew the truth, and He demanded an answer because we are all responsible for our brothers and sisters. Because of this great sin, God punished Cain and placed a curse on him. But when Cain confessed his wrongdoing, God showed him mercy. He marked Cain with a sign of protection and gave him the chance to repent. The door of mercy was still open. This story teaches us the value of obedience and faith. Be careful of jealousy and the power of sin. And what's the biggest lesson? Worship from the heart, not for show. Celebrate others' success. Don't be jealous. Sin has consequences, but God is always ready to forgive if you truly turn back to Him. We are each other's keepers. Guard your heart, honor God, love one another. The story of Cain and Abel is a lesson for every generations. Many years after the story of Cain, the world had changed. But there was one man, his name was Noah. Noah was a good and honest man. He always did what was right, and God was very pleased with his kindness and integrity. But not everyone was like Noah. Most people on earth had become wicked. They lied, they fought, and they didn't take care of the earth. When God looked at the world, His heart was filled with sorrow. He thought, this has to change. So God spoke to Noah and said, build a large boat called an ark. Bring into it 2 of every kind of animal, 1 male and 1 female. I'm going to send a great flood to cleanse the earth, but this ark will keep you, your family, and the animals safe. Noah didn't question God, not even once. He obeyed and started building the ark. It wasn't easy. It took many years, but Noah and his family worked hard. They chopped wood, used hammers, and followed every instruction God gave them. When the ark was finally done, Noah gathered the animals, lions, elephants, birds, and all creatures, 2 by 2. One day, Noah, his family, and all the animals went inside the ark, and then God Himself closed the massive door. Then the rain began. 1 day, 2 days, 10, 20. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Water rose higher and higher until the whole earth was underwater. But in the middle of the flood, the ark floated safely, keeping Noah and everyone inside protected. Living inside the ark wasn't easy. Space was tight, animals were everywhere, and outside there was only water. But Noah and his family stayed patient. They cared for each other, looked after the animals, and kept their faith in God. Finally, after 40 days, the rain stopped. Noah sent out a dove to see if it could find dry land, but it came back with nothing. A week later, he sent it again, and this time it returned with a fresh olive leaf in its beak. That was the sign they knew land was near. Then, one day, God said, "Noah, come out." Noah opened the door. He, his family, and all the animals stepped out onto dry ground. It was a day of joy and thankfulness. Together, they gave thanks to God. And then, God made a promise. Never again will I flood the whole earth. As a sign of that promise, He placed a beautiful rainbow in the sky. And even today, when we see a rainbow after it rains, we remember God's love and His faithfulness. This story teaches us, whoever listens to God, God protects them. Noah's obedience didn't just save him, it saved his whole family and all the animals of the world. One person's faithfulness can change the course of the entire world. After the great flood in Noah's time, his descendants began to spread across the earth, and their numbers grew. At that time, the whole world spoke a single language with one common speech. As people moved eastward, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and decided to settle there. They said to one another, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. Then we'll build a city for ourselves with a tower that reaches to the heavens. That way, we'll make a name for ourselves and won't be scattered across the earth." But their plan wasn't just about building. They wanted to glorify themselves, reach the heavens without God, and disobey His command to spread out across the world. They began constructing the tower, and it grew taller day by day. From the ground, it looked like an incredible man-made achievement. But from heaven, the Lord saw their pride. Then God said, "If this is what they can do as one people speaking the same language, then nothing they plan will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse their language so they won't understand each other." Suddenly, their languages changed. People couldn't understand one another. Communication between workers and leaders broke down. The construction stopped. The tower remained unfinished. That place was called Babel because it was there that the Lord confused the language of the whole world. And from there, He scattered them all over the earth, just as He had intended from the beginning. This story teaches us that human pride and attempts to glorify ourselves without God always lead to confusion and failure. But when we walk humbly and follow God's commands, He gives us true unity and purpose. As it says in the book of Psalms, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." The Tower of Babel reminds us that God doesn't oppose our unity or creativity, but He desires that we honor Him, obey Him, and walk in His ways. After the flood during Noah's time, many years later, a descendant of his son Shem was born, Abram. Abram lived in the great city of Ur. He lived a comfortable life, was wealthy, and respected by people because he followed God's ways. But one day, God said to him, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you." Although Abram didn't know where he was going, he obeyed. With his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot, he left everything behind and began a long journey toward an unknown land, which later became Canaan and is known today as Israel. During this journey, he faced famine, danger, and disappointment, but wherever he stopped, he built altars and worshipped God. Many years passed. Abram and Sarai grew old, but they had no children. God kept promising Abram that he would have many descendants, but as time passed, Sarai remained barren. Struggling with doubt, Sarai came up with a plan. She told Abram to have a child with her Egyptian maidservant Hagar. Out of love for his wife, Abram agreed. After marriage, Hagar became pregnant. But after the pregnancy, tension increased in the household. Sarai treated Hagar harshly, and Hagar fled into the wilderness. There, an angel of the Lord found Hagar and gently said, "Return and submit to Sarai. You will have a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your suffering." Hagar obeyed, and Ishmael was born. Yet God made it clear that his promise would be fulfilled through Sarai's son, not through Hagar's. One hot afternoon, as Abraham sat near his tent under the oaks of Mamre, he saw 3 mysterious men approaching. He ran to welcome them and unknowingly welcomed his God and 2 of his angels. As they ate in the shade, one of the angels said to Abraham, "This time next year, your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah, listening from inside the tent, laughed, thinking, how could this be possible in her old age? But the Lord said, "Is anything too hard for me?" And as promised, a year later, Isaac was born, his name meaning laughter. Though Abraham loved both his sons, God made it clear that Isaac was the child of the promise. Eventually, at God's command, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away. But God did not forget them. He promised that Ishmael would also become a great nation and protected them in the wilderness. Abraham lived many more years. Although he did not see the complete fulfillment of God's promise with his own eyes, he died in faith, trusting the same God who had led him from Ur to Canaan. Faith sometimes means walking into the unknown. God's promises aren't always fulfilled immediately, but they are always true. Even when we make mistakes, like in the case of Hagar, God shows compassion and still works through us. Nothing is impossible for God. Abraham's story teaches us that we must walk with faith, obedience, and trust. Even when the path is hard or the promise seems delayed, we must remain faithful.
Hello. When the Lord brought Abram from Ur to the land of Canaan, his family settled there. He and his wife Sarai were very old, and they had no children. Still, Abram believed the voice that had called him to leave his homeland of Ur and follow a path he didn't know. As the years went by, Abram grew even older, but he and Sarai still had no child. Because of Sarai's insistence, Abram married Hagar, and through her, Ishmael was born. At that time, Abram was 86 years old. One quiet evening, as the sun sank behind the hills and the desert lay silent, the Lord appeared to Abram in a vision. The Lord said, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I am making a covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations." Abram fell face down, overwhelmed by God's presence. Then God said something amazing. "Your name will no longer be Abram," which meant exalted father. "Your name will be Abraham," meaning father of many nations. "Because I have made you a father of many nations, I will make you extremely fruitful. Kings will come from your descendants, and I will establish an everlasting covenant between me and your descendants after you." Although Abraham already had a son through Hagar, God's covenant would be established through the child of Abraham and Sarah. At that time, they had no child together, but Abraham believed. Then God said, "And your wife Sarai, don't call her Sarai anymore. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her, and she will give you a son. She will become the mother of nations." Abraham bowed low, laughter stirring in his heart. Can a 100-year-old man become a father? Can Sarah give birth at 90? But God said again, "Yes, and you will name him Isaac." From that moment on, Abram became Abraham, not just a man of faith, but a symbol of God's promise. His new name wasn't just a title, it was a prophecy, a covenant, a divine identity, marking the beginning of a chosen people. And God's promise came true. A few months later, when the Lord appeared to Abraham near the trees of Mamre, he said that in 1 year Sarah would have a son. And exactly as promised, when Abraham was 100 years old, Isaac was born. From Abraham came Isaac, then Jacob, and generations that would one day bless the entire world. God had chosen Abraham to become a great nation. One day, as Abraham was resting near the trees of Mamre, 3 men came to him. These divine beings included one who was a manifestation of the Lord himself, and the other 2 were angels. The Lord revealed to Abraham that he was going to examine the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because the sinful state of those places had become very serious, and the cry of their oppression had reached him. Abraham, knowing that his nephew Lot lived in Sodom, pleaded with God and asked, "Will you really destroy the righteous along with the wicked?" Abraham pleaded further with God, "If there are 50 righteous people, or 45, 30, 20, even 10, will you still destroy the city?" And the Lord replied, "If I find 10 righteous people in Sodom, I will not destroy it." That same evening, the 2 angels arrived in Sodom, where Lot was sitting at the city gate. Lot immediately recognized them, bowed respectfully, and urged them not to spend the night in the public square, but to come to his home instead. Later that night, all the men of the city, both young and old, surrounded Lot's house, demanding that he send out the guests so they could commit immorality with them. Lot tried to stop them and even offered his own daughters in desperation, but the crowd became more aggressive. Then the angels pulled Lot inside, shut the door, and struck the men with blindness so that they could not find the doorway. The angels then revealed their divine purpose to Lot. "We have come to destroy this place. The cry of its people's wickedness has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it." The angels told Lot to gather his family and flee the city. When Lot hesitated, the angels took him, his wife, and his 2 daughters by the hand and led them out of the city. They gave a clear command: "Run for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain." Lot requested to escape to a small nearby town called Zoar instead of fleeing to the mountains, and God granted this request. As soon as Lot and his family reached safety, God rained down burning sulfur and fire from heaven, completely destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. The entire region, the cities, fields, trees, and all living creatures, was consumed. However, Lot's wife, despite the warning, looked back and immediately became a pillar of salt. The next morning, Abraham looked down from the hill and saw dense smoke rising from the land, like the smoke from a furnace. God's judgment had been fulfilled, yet God remembered Abraham and, because of him, saved Lot from the destruction. Lessons we learn from this story is: God is just yet merciful. He listened to Abraham's intercession and saved Lot. Persistent sin brings consequences. Cities like Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed because they refused to repent. God hears the cries of the oppressed. The cry of injustice in the cities reached the Lord. Obedience is essential. Lot's wife disobeyed the command and suffered the result. The righteous can influence judgment. Abraham's prayers delayed God's destruction. When Abraham was 160 years old, Isaac and his wife Rebekah were living in the land of Canaan. For many years, they had no children. But one day, God heard their prayers, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. Even inside the womb, the 2 babies were fighting with each other. Rebekah asked God, "Why is this happening?" And God said, "2 nations are in your womb. The older will serve the younger." When the babies were born, the first child came out red and hairy. They named him Esau. Right after him came the second baby, holding Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob, which means one who grabs. As they grew up, Esau became a strong hunter, while Jacob preferred to stay home. Isaac loved Esau more because he brought him tasty wild meat, but Rebekah loved Jacob more. One day, Esau came home from hunting, exhausted and starving. Jacob had just cooked some red lentil stew. Esau said, "Let me eat, I'm starving to death." Jacob replied, "Only if you sell me your birthright." Back then, the birthright meant being the head of the family and receiving the father's special blessing. Esau said, "I'm about to die anyway. What good is a birthright to me?" So, for a bowl of stew, Esau gave up his birthright to Jacob. Later, when Isaac was old and blind, he said to Esau, "Go hunt and cook me a meal, and then I'll give you my final blessing." Rebekah overheard this and told Jacob to pretend to be Esau. She dressed him in Esau's clothes and put goat hair on his hands and neck. Jacob went to his father. Isaac asked, "Are you Esau?" Jacob lied and said, "Yes, I am." So Isaac gave Jacob the blessing that was meant for Esau, a blessing of wealth, leadership, and God's favor. Soon after, Esau came in and found out the truth. He cried out loudly in pain. Though Isaac gave Esau a lesser blessing, the special one had already been given away. Esau had lost his right for just one meal. He said, "Is there no blessing left for me?" Isaac replied sadly, "Your brother has taken it." Esau, filled with anger and not seeing his own mistake, said, "When our father dies, I will kill Jacob." When Rebekah heard this, she sent Jacob away to live with her brother Laban, far away. On the journey, Jacob had a dream, a ladder reaching up to heaven with angels going up and down. Jacob lived with Laban for 20 years. He married, had children, and became wealthy. Then God told him, "Go back to your home." But Jacob was afraid. Was Esau still angry with me? He sent gifts ahead to Esau and prayed, "God, please save me from my brother." Esau came with 400 men. Jacob bowed down in humility. But something amazing happened. Esau ran to Jacob, hugged him, and cried. He forgave him. The two brothers were reconciled and went their separate ways, both carrying God's blessing. Moral of the story is, Esau lost his great blessing because he traded it for something small. Jacob made mistakes by following deceit, but he trusted God. In the end, forgiveness and peace were the true victory. After Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away, he and Sarah loved their little boy Isaac very much. They held him, fed him, and played with him. When his tiny hand grabbed their finger, they laughed. When he smiled for the first time, they were overjoyed. And when he spoke his first word, their hearts were full of happiness. Soon, Isaac learned to walk and talk, and he grew into a sweet young boy. He was the joy of their lives. Abraham spent a lot of time with Isaac. He taught him to love God and obey him. He told Isaac the story of how God had told him to count the stars, and how Isaac was the special child God had promised. As Isaac grew, he learned to worship God just like his father. One day, God called, "Abraham!" Abraham answered, "I'm here." God said, "Take your son Isaac, the one you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt sacrifice on the mountain I will show you." Abraham loved Isaac more than anything in the whole world. He would never want to hurt him, but he knew he had to obey God. Early the next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey, called Isaac and 2 young servants, and chopped wood for the sacrifice. Then they started their journey. They traveled for 3 days, eating the food they brought and sleeping on the ground. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He told his servants, "Isaac and I are going to worship God, and then we'll come back." Abraham gave Isaac the wood to carry. Abraham carried the torch and the knife. As they walked, Isaac asked, "Dad, we have the wood and the fire, but where's the lamb for the sacrifice?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb, my son." When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar out of large stones, placed the wood on it, and then hugged Isaac tightly. With tears in his eyes, he tied up his son and laid him on the altar. Isaac didn't want to be sacrificed, and Abraham didn't want to do it either, but they both knew they must obey God. Abraham picked up the knife and raised it high. Just then, the angel of the Lord called from heaven, "Abraham! Abraham!" Abraham replied, "I'm here." The angel said, "Do not hurt your son. Now I know you fear and love God more than anything, even your own child." Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a bush by its horns. He untied Isaac, caught the ram, and offered it as the sacrifice instead. On that mountain, Abraham and Isaac worshipped God together. Abraham named the place Jehovah-Jireh, which means the Lord will provide. The angel of the Lord called again and said, "Because you have done this and not kept your son from me, I will bless you greatly. Your descendants will be many, and all nations on earth will be blessed through you." Abraham and Isaac walked back down the mountain, happy that God had provided the ram and given them another promise. They met the servants, and together they made the 3-day trip back home. What did we learn from the story? We should always put faith on God alone. Abraham knew God told him his descendant would be like the stars of the sky. So how could God would not keep his word? So friends, keep your faith in God alone. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. To watch more videos on Bible, subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you.